Dear participants, if you have any questions or remarks, please feel free to have your questions and remarks. We will give you this microphone and you can take your questions if you have to lectures, topics or lecturers as well.
Hello, my name is Tomasz Mirosławski. I'm from Ferenc Mádl. It's Zach Ferenc Doctoral School. I'm sorry, I'm confused. I've got a question to Professor Buleca from Ukraine, because Professor, you said something like this, that all those restrictions that are provided now to fight COVID, those are like violations to personal freedom. And I'm not sure if those are violations. Maybe it's more like limitation of personal freedom. And now it's the question is, what is in your opinion, if we should care more about the personal freedom or like common good or common safety of people?
This is the question of every scientist and practitioner. I think that we need to care about the peoples of the society, but we cannot violate the rules. So if somebody is ill, for example, in COVID-19, so it is he need be restricted and stay at home, and that's all. So, but not restricted to movement, not restricted. It's my opinion, because when you have restricted the freedom of movement, and freedom of, I don't know, going somewhere or running, as I said. So I think this is a violation of rights which we have in Constitution. So, but we need to have this, I don't know, maybe committee that will be check all these people, or they where are they going, what will they talking with whom and who is ill, and that all. So, but if the state, like in Italy, it was awful, really. Italy was awful, but I was in that time in Italy, and they was everything was under control of the state. And I think this was in Italy, this devolution, because in Ukraine we don't have this. We had the law, we had the restriction, but everybody went to the cafe, drink coffee, and we was free in that time, in the COVID time. Yes, we had ill people, but no, this like in Italy. I feel at the time I was in Italy, and it was we cannot go outside. The children stay at home. No, but I am talking about the Tuscany, and policemen, they are going all the day, all the time, and check us. So I think that we cannot do such thing like Italy did. So it's my opinion. In Hungary, I was in the time in Hungary. It was interesting because you had that without this COVID certification, you cannot go to the restaurant for the first time. And after that, everything was free. You cannot go to the, I don't know, to shops. Yes, it's such a restriction you have in. No, it was normal, but Italy, it was awful. Well, it's my opinion, because I can compare Italy, Ukraine, and Hungary, because I was in this time in all three countries. And I think it was the violation. This country, they had the violation, because it's my opinion. It's my opinion, because I live for months in Ukraine, I live then for months in Italy, and I see everything. So I thought, this is my opinion, because you can see Australia, New Zealand, Danish, Netherlands. They have no such a restriction like Italy. And they have no such a, I understand the Italian government, because a lot of people die, but they are old, and we need to understand, they are more than 90. For example, where I live, and they have this table, and every week we can see who died, and it is 92, 93, 95, so it is only in Italy they have such old people, that live. That's why they have this restriction. It's my opinion. It is my practice. Thank you.
I will answer. I want to make a question, sir. Okay. I use this one. Yes, okay. First of all, yes, you're right. In Italy, we have probably one of the highest average age in the world. So, and COVID-19, hopefully, I would say, hit more the old people instead of the younger. The plague used to kill the children, which is awful because then you don't have, the preservation of the human beings. Anyway, yes, we had a strong measure, but the Constitution could consider to be only a limitation, going to your question, and not a complete derogation to freedoms, because people were allowed to walk around their place, I would say. Okay, that's not too much. Then it depends. It depends also on which part of Italy, because measures were applied differently. Because in practical terms, for example, in Naples, where there are 10 people in a small house, they cannot live, so the police close one eye. Okay, so there was this kind of approach. And then the fine, I mean, you would have been fined, but not put in jail. I mean, China is a different approach, I would say, okay? So this is a really different approach. Anyway, we know we had a strong lockdown, so I'm sure that we had a strong lockdown for that period, but that was the only solution that we could have, because that was, I didn't have the time to explain that this is the typical mitigation measure. When the pandemic is in your country, the only thing you can do is try to slow down in order to preserve the hospital from being overcrowded of people, because then you would have to do another really hard choice. Which are the people that I have to tell them, you will die, we have not resources to help you. So in other countries that they introduced a curfew or a limitation only for older people. Maybe we would have done this? No, because anyway, nephew will go to their grandparents. So, I mean, and people do not understand such measure. None of us is using the face mask in this room, while we are still under pandemic. So, that was necessary at this time. Anyway, not me, but well, I wrote before the Constitutional Court decision, 1 year before the Constitutional Court decision, and I wrote that it was a limitation to free movement and not a limitation of personal liberty. And it was, because at the end, I mean, if you really got crazy, you would have gone out and got 50 euros or 300 euros according to the period of fine. That was the limitation. Now I have the question or the consideration, if I may, to Attila. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very good. You know something, you do this, but COVID-19 was a kind of emergency of a new type, because we are used, at least in Italy, we have a very good experience of emergencies which are dealt under ordinary legislation, because we have a code of civil protection, we have a strong system. We do derogate to the law, but not to the Constitution when there are some kind of emergencies. And the only way to make things work in Italy is to appoint, we call them a commissioner for this specific thing, because so they do not apply the laws and they will speedily reach the result. So, but the COVID-19 was something new. And the solution, why it is a matter for lawyers more than for doctors? Because at the beginning, we didn't have anything to do against the pandemic. The only thing we could do was to enact some kind of restrictions. That was the only solution. We had vaccines and medicines only later on. Until now, we do not have medicines. I mean, we have some kind of medicine, but it is not a real cure. We have some vaccine. So still, the role of the lawyers, and so I answer also the previous question, was very important in order to find a balancing on which kind of restriction to enact as compared to, of course, the freedoms. But this is a typical, it is a new kind of emergency. The typical emergency are earthquakes, floods, this kind of, I will not talk about wars, because wars is something terrible that we are now looking in Ukraine, and we hope it will not a problem for us. But the other kind of emergencies, usually, they have emergency power to the administration in order to do something after the emergency took place, in order to repair, to restore people, whatever. Because when there is a flood and when there is an earthquake, you intervene afterwards. In COVID-19, we were acting during the emergency in order to mitigate it. So this is a different kind of approach. For example, the Italian system was fit for this kind of emergency, but we were completely unfit for this new kind of emergency. So this is something that, I don't know if in your research, but I mean, I know this is one step, but then we will collaborate on this. It is interesting to compare the different ways to deal with this emergency. And I don't remember which presentation, and I will stop, I promise. There was somebody talking about, sorry, I took the note in the computer, but a commission taking care of emergency, working for the government. I don't know, it was one of the last presentation before the break. Sorry for, you know for sure. So it is interesting. Slovak?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a chapter on Slovakia, and János Sinek next to me.
Okay. Yes. So that's a good system. But what kind of emergency is this body ready to face? Any kind of emergency? Because we have the same in Italy, but it has to do with kind of political emergency, economic emergency. So maybe it will have some kind of economic intervention, but it is not fit for health emergency. So again, we should prepare better also for this kind of new emergency. So these are just suggestions, no questions.
Thank you very much. And actually, I'm very thankful for being part of this interesting discussion. As a matter of fact, it is time to start discussing the various things that we learned through the pandemic. And we learned a lot and touching many fields of law. For what concerns Greece, we have Article 48 of the Constitution, which we call state of siege. That's the article, state of siege, what we do in what we used to call states of siege. And by reading it carefully, you see that it has nothing to do with what happened with the pandemic. They, in the historic Greek constitutional author, wanted to face situations like war or the threat of internal threat of stability of the regime, and also putches. Now, the war, because we, as you know, we were born by an international treaty in 1830, and we were around 1/5 of the country that you know today. So we completed the national territory, ancestral Greek land, only in 1948. And so we had wars in all generations. I am the first generation which did not have the privilege to defend the country, or the putches, because we had many. And the threat was mainly the communist threat, because we had a civil war from 46 to 49, which, thank God, was won by the government or by the Americans, I don't know by whom, but it was won. The article does not foresee anything about a crisis like a pandemic, and I believe that if we go through all the older constitutions, it will be rare to find the state of siege for facing cases like the pandemic. I understood that in the Visegrad countries, where you have younger generations, younger constitutions, in some of them you foresee this kind of emergencies. This being said, I believe that it's been proved, at least in my country, that we could take the most severe measures the confinement, the mask, and actually very successfully in a very anarchic population, and with a paradigmatic discipline, without needing at all the Article 48, the state of siege. Nobody referred to the state of siege. Actually, if any Greek government referred to the state of siege, it would be a disaster for the government, I see, because we had a putsch in 1967 in the name of Article 48. What they did, the colonels, the putschs in those days, they declared a revolution, quote, under quotes, a revolution, and, I mean, they made the putsch, and they put in force the mechanism of Article 48. I mean, the constitutional rule for state of siege, plus the legislation which follows. They applied the law. The first act was illegal, the taking of the power. But then they applied the law, the constitution and the law. And so we didn't need anything. One characteristic of the Greek experiment is that the government reacted quickly and put in motion the digitalization of the governance. The Greek reforms in the direction of the digitalization of the state, which took place in the months of the pandemic, have truly changed the state, and they will remain. And all the administration of the COVID was done through SMSs. I mean, I want to go out of the house. I have 6 reasons which I could declare. I could choose one of the 6, an SMS, and I received my positive answer to go out immediately, and then I could go out, and I would be controlled eventually by the policeman, and I would show my smartphone. Actually, it was for a country like Greece, it was an opportunity, if I may say that, to modernize the state in the direction of digitalization. There is one more thing which is very interesting, however, to remember about that period. That it is very interesting that in the European Union, where more or less, or I believe every state is applying liberal policies, every state, and at least Greece, became a socialist state. Everybody lived on the shoulders of the state budget. Everybody received subsidies. And actually, the government took the habit, and now they do the same with the energy. We live in a state of subsidies. Everybody gets his little coupons for this, little coupon for that. Well, perhaps it was about time to remember socialism. I don't know. And then there is one more thing which is important, I believe, to not only not to forget, but also to work upon. The working relations. because with remote work, working through internet, etc., we were able to face the situation and have the society work, if not at 100%, at 20% or 40%, etc. However, habits have been created. First of all, of those who have had their working force working out of the place of work, and then for those who were out of the place of work. And you could be in your kitchen, look after the kids, prepare your meal and work. And for some this was a nightmare, because going back to home and doing 3 things at the same time, it's not the best thing to do. But now, if you are asked to go back, perhaps you reevaluate if you want to go back. This is going to create tensions in the society, because there are interests, and on both parts, interests of those who give, who employ, and interests for those who are employed. And it's not as easy to conceive how the work will be done in the coming years, just because we have the enthusiasm of, oh, we found new ways of working. There will be tensions and social movements. Last but not least, it has been observed that in many countries, an important part of the workforce refused to come back to work. They understood that they can live with less, I don't know where this less comes from, and happy, instead of going back. I saw that I heard, that's the best term to use, in New York, a big part of the taxis do not work anymore, because the taxi drivers did not come back after COVID. They understood that life was very, very difficult, that they could have other ways of living. So we are in a transit period, and we are going, we lawyers, to have to deal with situations, to interpret them and put them into system, and that's good for us, because we will be useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you. Questions or remarks still? Thank you very much for your closing remark, as I as I see.
I have a remark about Ukraine. It's because Horvat, he said that we have 2 times declaration of war, but it was the first time, it was in 2014, and it was only for 1 month in Odessa region. So it is not for all Ukraine we have. Now we have for all Ukraine. It isn't. Yes, and the emergency situation we have of COVID, but it's not called the state emergency situation, it's called emergency situation. But we call it is the type of state of emergency. So it is. What? When
was the war in Odessa?
In Odessa in 2014. And when they, yes, it was about the depend of the Crimea. So, but only 1 region, Odessa. And I was in that time I was in Odessa, so it was nothing. So only everybody thought that something will happen, and but they lived as usual.
So may I reflect? The table I used included only the emergency regimes, at constitutional level, and as far as I know, the emergency situation is a sub-constitutional level. Okay, that's why I will. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, fine.
So, any other remarks, opinions, questions? If not, then let me extend you my great gratitude to all of you for your presentations and for your attention. And many thanks to the Faculty of Law of the Miskolc University for hosting us, for hosting this event. Thank you very much for your participation, and have a nice evening and night. Thank you very much. Bye.